Hey y'all, here are OS Reviews. In this video, we're taking a quick look at the Awei H18. This is an entry-level smartwatch that has a pretty stylish design and actually works quite well for basic activity tracking and just some light notifications using a magnetic strap that's actually very easy to pop in and remove, along with sporting a relatively large and vibrant-looking, always-on display-enabled 1.43-inch round AMOLED touchscreen display. And this is further complemented with the real working crown key that you can use to rotate through the menu options, as well as having a metal trim on the outer parameters that makes it feel and look a little bit more premium. Now, some of you guys may have seen our last smartwatch video, which was on the Tozo S6, another budget model, but unfortunately that one ended in disaster. There was an unfortunate critical design flaw with the watch bands, making it kind of difficult to recommend. So I'm happy to report that the Awei H18 hasn't had any of those build quality concerns that we had on that other model. This one actually feels surprisingly polished and well put together. So although it isn't exactly a high mark to overcome, the H18 has gotten off to a much stronger start when it comes to first impressions. A brief overview of some of these specs. The screen resolution is 466 by 466, so it's actually pretty sharp. The watch will otherwise last around 7 to 10 days before you have to recharge it again, because the operating system is not as advanced as on an Android Wear or an Apple Watch. You can't really download third-party apps on it, but again, for basic notifications and light fitness tracking, it still seems to do an okay job. It's also IP68 rated for waterproof resistance. In an ideal world, would have liked to see 5 ATM, but it is what it is. A couple other watch colors can also be picked between, including blue. We have the bronze edition. There's also a more discreet black and gray to pick between. The watch otherwise just connects to any smartphone, including iOS or Android, using Bluetooth. And inside of the packaging, you'll find another secondary strap, which is more of this traditional rubber material, if you prefer this to the magnetic loop that comes pre-attached out of the box. There's also going to be the magnetic charging adapter here on the back of the watch, as well as just a quick user guide that's actually pretty well documented in this vibrant yellow colorway that the Awei logo is presented with. So it's pretty good presentation from this brand that is perhaps better known for making headphones and speakers. The feature set, though, is still relatively light, like a fitness tracker more than anything else. There is continuous heart rate monitoring, as well as stress and SpO2 blood oxygen monitoring, in addition to a built-in speaker and microphone for answering calls when connected to your phone. However, this model is lacking a built-in SIM card slot, so it can't be used as a phone, for example, on its own, and also it doesn't come with built-in GPS, but it can rely on connected GPS if you're paired to your phone and want to track your route when running. And so it seems to me that the main selling points on this model is going to be the design being a bit more stylish, the slightly more premium build crafted out of aluminum alloy for the frame, and that pretty sharp and impressive looking round OLED screen. That being said, features again are still relatively entry level. And that comes to one of the potential cons of this model, is you're definitely paying a little bit more of a premium for this fit and finish. More specifically, this model is retailing at around $130, which I do think is a little bit on the steep side, considering the feature set here we have seen on less expensive smartwatches in the past. So in ideal world, would have liked to see them price this at under $100, since at the moment I think it's a little bit too close to some of the other entry-level Android Wear smartwatches offering more advanced hardware for it to be as good of a value as it should have been. That being said, be on the lookout for sales and discounts, perhaps coupons, that will later on bring the cost lower. There's also going to be a button on the side that you can tap on to jump into some quick shortcuts for tracking your exercise and sports sessions. Located on the very back here is going to be the removable watch straps, and we have the charging contacts. Again, the frame of the watch, including this bezel section, is all crafted out of metal, and the screen is slightly recessed to protect it a little bit more against scratches and daily wear. Moving across the UI, it's relatively simple. We can swipe down to access some quick shortcuts, including changing the screen brightness, and luckily I didn't have too many complaints in this regard, even viewing it with some ambient light around. Some other utility tools include a flashlight mode to illuminate objects a little bit better in the dark, as well as a power saving mode that will turn off some of the continuous tracking modes if you are using it in a pinch, and a night/do not disturb mode. Under more advanced settings, if you go over to display, we're able to cycle through some other preloaded watch faces that all look relatively attractive. You have a nice selection of analog and digital options to pick between. The timeout duration for the screen can also be adjusted here, in addition to the raised awake functionality using the accelerometer to activate the display, and the menu style. So by default, it's going to be showing all the full list of applications in this list format, But if desired, you can choose through these other animation styles, such as this honeycomb that feels a little bit more closer to something like an Apple Watch, for example. Also allows you to zoom in and out using that crown key. Here's a couple of other examples, including the grid layout, also looking pretty neat, although the icons themselves are no longer labeled in these modes. Here's one more that positions the tiles in more of the square format, as well as one that has a slightly more interesting animation going on here on the side that you're also able to scroll through, which can also be flipped into the horizontal orientation instead, as well as this round animated design pattern that kind of reminds me of an analog style rotary dial on a retro phone can also be used, and it also has haptic vibration motor that will buzz every time that the dial here is rotated. Interestingly though, the always-on display mode isn't located under the general display settings, but rather is a separate tab called Screen Clock, and if you're activating this, it will again turn on that particular function, and you can choose a couple other styles for the always-on display mode, as well as options for a digital version of the always-on screen as well that you can pick between, like this one here in a kind of pixel-inspired way that also looks quite cool. So it's going to time out after a couple of seconds, looking something like this. Swiping up allows us to check any notifications pass through from the phone, and then we go into the carousel of widgets, including the first one here for activity, including steps, calories burned, exercise duration will be shown for the current day. The next one over will show you sleep status. We'll talk more about the accuracy later in this video. There's also going to be a heart rate tracking function here. You can see the continuous map during the past day, as well as a widget here for estimated blood pressure. Now this is still using the heart rate monitoring and SpO2 to give you a rough idea, converting it into something like blood pressure. So it's not going to be as medically grade accurate as some of the designs which have an inflatable cuff that's actually taking the real blood pressure, but it provides you with a rough idea. Next one over is going to be SpO2 blood oxygen, and this does require you to stay still for around 15 seconds to get a measurement, and it isn't continuous, unlike the heart rate monitoring and stress monitoring are 24/7. So just keep that in mind. For this particular metric, it has to be triggered manually from this screen. The next tile over is going to be the aforementioned stress level monitoring, gauging if you're calm, and you can also trigger notifications on your phone to alert you if you've exceeded a certain threshold for things like heart rate to give you a warning. The next one here is going to be a weather widget that will also show you the highs, lows, and then we go over to the main screen. We can swipe over on the left actually to trigger a shortcut page of some of the recently opened apps, as well as swipe over once again to enter the full list of applications. It's from here that we can access a dialer pad if you're connected to your phone using Bluetooth, using the speakerphone as well as the microphone built on in here. Further scrolling down allows you to access some quick shortcuts for features like a countdown timer. Basic stopwatch function can also be found, as well as a world clock. You're able to set up additional time zones in the companion app and push them over. You can see a rough change there in the background if it's day or night in the different cities that you've set up. There's also going to be functions here like a calculator, very simple but kind of fun to see, and some basic games. Just a novelty aspect is also found, including one here called Hamster. There's one called Battleship, and you also find a kind of Flappy Bird as well as a 2048 version can all be found. So for example, with Hamster, it's basically just whack-a-mole. You're supposed to tap on these little hamsters or moles as they pop up from the ground, and you can tap on different icons there to extend your time, seeing how many points you can collect until the time runs down to 0. If you hit the bomb, of course, the game there will be over. So here's the Battle Galactica-inspired space game with these aliens. You have to kind of try and knock them away using the spacecraft as it's firing out the missiles. A classic game, kind of in this 8-bit style. In addition to that Flappy Bird inspired version, also working as expected. Pretty simple tap and go style games. So it's nothing too fancy, but at least it is functional and better than nothing, I would say. Although again, since the operating system of this watch is very simple, you aren't able to really download any additional titles or push them over. What you see here is basically what you're going to get. Now the watch also has a couple of connected remote control functions, including using it as a selfie remote. You're able to take selfies with a larger group of people and then tap there to snap an image, as you can see there. Plus, if there's any music that you're currently listening on YouTube or Spotify, you're able to control it on your wrist with the connected smartwatch there using play, pause, and skip track commands. Although the watch itself doesn't have any built-in memory, so it can't be used as an offline MP3 player. And in similar fashion, there is a voice assistant here. So on Android devices, it may trigger the Gemini Assistant. Hello, who are you?
It's nice to meet you. How can I help you today?
It also picked up what we wanted to say and preserved a text copy as well. So if your phone is in your pocket, as long as it's connected by Bluetooth, you're able to access those controls from the watch. What's the typical weather in Hawaii during December?
Here's a summary of the typical weather in Hawaii during December. Temperature. Expect daytime temperatures in the low 80s degree F, around 27 degrees Celsius.
So not bad, but there is just a little bit more latency because it has to be transferring the data from the phone over to the watch instead of processing it all locally. So expect to wait just maybe a split second longer there if you're accessing this feature. There's also a relaxation tab that includes one for calming down and one for falling asleep, which is a new one to me. You can set a duration, for example, 5 or 10 minutes, and when you tap on start, it's again going to use the haptic vibrations to gently buzz, breathe out with the bubbles and animations here to get you to maybe calm down and drift into sleep. So relatively simple. Now, something else I forgot to mention about the design of the watch is if you look very closely, even though the surface here is round, the shape of the body on the outside with the metal shell actually has more of that square-like appearance in some of the edges, as you can tell. The build and shell here definitely being areas that the H18 is a little bit more unique, I would say. Now, lastly, let's take a quick look at some of the basic fitness and sports that you're able to begin from here, including walking, running, cycling, and if you tap on more, you can add even more activities, specific combat sports. These are just a way to basically label the activities that you're performing, and from the watch, it's able to then track your heart rate second per second, calories burned, and you'll be able to sync that data onto your phone to better label what sessions you were performing. What it doesn't necessarily have, though, would be any automatic or intelligent recognition of sports activities, so it has to be triggered manually on this particular model. Let's take a closer look at the companion app. So it's called Awei Fit, and connecting to the watch is actually quite simple, just using Bluetooth. Pairing as well as syncing information over is also relatively quick. Didn't have too many connectivity issues in my testing so far. The app is definitely more simple when it comes to stats compared to Fitbits, for example, but at least you're able to sync things over and recall trends over time. For example, taking a look at steps, we're able to see the points in time that we were a bit more active during the day. And similarly, for sleep tracking, we can see the breakdown of light versus deep sleep, REM, as well as our sleep score is also reflected here. Although some of the metrics here, like the scores, you aren't able to actually read from the watch, so you have to see this info displayed on the app instead. Although it does take your sleeping average heart rate as well, plus you can check out a histogram view of if you're sleeping too late versus early compared to the population and how you are currently sitting. For example, you have a number and a basic description, but doesn't go into too much depth of further breaking these down into personalized recommendations of how to act on the data, which a more expensive Fitbit and other more premium smartwatches might offer. Also, sleep tracking is most effective during nighttime hours, meaning if you're napping during noon, it may not necessarily track that as sleep automatically. So that is another area for the software that I think they should improve on to make it even more competitive to match those premium ambitions. And also, when it comes to the accuracy of the sleep tracking, it's not bad, but it technically counts the duration of sleep whenever you first fallen asleep at night. For example, in this instance, the areas here are awake because I was basically just lying down for a couple of minutes. I was then checking some emails, doing a bit of work before finally actually falling asleep, which is why the total duration might be a little long, even though for this first section here, I wasn't actually completely asleep. So I think ideally, for a more accurate number of hours or minutes slept, they should subtract the awake time in their calculation. But overall, the rough breakdown of light versus deep, REM, and awake times do seem to be not too far off, and those remarks are echoed across the heart rate as well as the pedometer number of steps. These metrics also seemed roughly in line with some of Amazfit and Xiaomi Mi Bands that I was comparing it against. Again, stats for other metrics here, including the estimated blood pressure, blood oxygen, stress, will also be displayed in a pretty similar fashion. One metric that is missing, however, would be a consolidated health score, maybe out of 100, that takes into account your sleep, steps, activity, tells you if you're 70 or 80% active, for example. So right now they're all broken apart into these separate metrics. Again, just a little bit more refinement here in the software could probably take this to the next level, but it's not too surprising considering that this brand is still relatively new at making wearables like these. And from down below here, you can also tap on the device tab to check out the battery percentage and also add more watch faces or dials, sending them over from the phone. And you have actually not a bad selection of watch faces that are all free to download and then push over, including various ones which are more colorful, others ones which are going to be analog, including some holiday themed designs as well. So not a bad selection here. And you are able to create your own custom watch dial as well, such as your own photo that you can upload as the background, changing the position of the time information to be higher or lower and the text color. You can also change what types of notifications pass through from the phone, locating the watch, as well as setting up the aforementioned world clock and alarms. There's an e-card profile or a QR code that you can save onto the watch. If it contains maybe your profile invite on WhatsApp or some other social media platform, other people can scan that code stored on the watch as a easy reference. And there's also going to be a couple of other advanced features for changing things like 12 versus 24-hour time format, changing the city location for weather info, as well as if you want to turn on or off the heart rate monitoring continuously during the day, or change the duration to be taking a test every X minutes to consume a little bit less power. There's also going to be an SOS mode, by the way, that you can trigger if you're tapping on the crown key 5 times in succession. So when activated, it will contact your emergency contact or 911, for example, if you're feeling in danger. A pretty good accessibility function. The final tap here allows you to change your profile settings like goals, how many steps you want to reach, as well as your height, weight, and stride length to better calibrate the accelerometer to detect your steps more accurately. And last but not least, the tab over here also allows you to begin a running session from the phone app if you're trying to use the connected GPS mode, as well as check out a couple of courses that they have available as well, which are free to reference. It'll preview the exercises located in the content, and once you begin, it will play back the instructions on the speaker of the smartwatch. You can hear it as you're wearing it.
Crunches. 3, 2, 1, go.
Although the screen of the watch itself isn't going to be displaying any information, it's just coming through from the speakers, but you can also track your heart rate as you're performing these sessions. Under the meditation training section, you can also find some white noise sounds for things like falling asleep, such as a river sound, or you can choose a campfire, ocean, birds, or rain, and also the duration of the session as well. Once we begin this, again, the sound will come out from the speakers of the watch. So actually not a bad idea considering all of these extra courses as well as meditation activities are completely free. There is no subscription cost involved. And also, the app doesn't really have any advertisements that I can spot. It's basically just the core functions that you're trying to use, and that's it. So one way to look at this is you're paying a little bit more of an upfront cost to get you an experience that's a little less cluttered compared to some entry-level budget models, which may throw ads in your face when you're using the app. So you get the idea, especially for some of these calming meditation-related courses are a little bit more comprehensive. So that is more or less it as far as our quick hands-on review of the Awei H18 series smartwatch. And again, this model doesn't offer anything we haven't seen that's radically different from the perspective of features. It still is a relatively simple smartwatch, more like an elevated fitness tracker with a more impressive screen. However, I have to say that the display here is definitely beautiful to see, having that always-on display mode, very sharp, and the build quality here is also going to be top-notch with the metal finish, plus a very clean and streamlined app experience as well. That being said, if you're looking for more advanced functionality like built-in GPS, or if you expect more customizable third-party apps to be installable on the watch, then unfortunately you don't find those aspects here, which is why I still think despite the really good fit and finish, ideally, they should have made this thing a little bit cheaper since they're still a relatively new brand in this space. But anyways, not bad, especially if you like the way this one looks. At least the core experience for basic fitness and notifications seems to work well enough. You can check out more details if you are interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the very stylish Awei H18 smartwatch.